The shadow of Pine Hollow. In the northern forests of the U.S. state of Montana, there was a small town known to the people as Pine Hollow. During the day, this place looked like any other town. Quiet streets, wooden houses, small shops, and pine trees stretching far and wide. But after nightfall, Pine Hollow became a different world. The locals did not even go near the forest after sunset. Children were strictly forbidden from leaving the house after dusk. And the strangest thing was that no one was ready to tell the real reason for this ban. Everyone just said the same sentence. If you hear your name in the forest at night, don't answer. 28-year-old Ethan Carter was a freelance journalist. He used to research mysterious events and real horror stories on the internet. One day he came across an old news story. 17 people mysteriously missing in Pine Hollow over the past 20 years. The news was brief. No details. No explanation, just names, dates, and disappearance. That's what piqued Ethan's interest. He decided to go to Pine Hollow himself and find out the truth. 2 days later, Ethan drove into the town in his SUV, driving through the mountain roads of Montana. It was evening. A red light was spreading across the sky. As he approached the town's entrance sign, his eyes caught sight of something strange. Someone had written in red on the bottom of the sign, "He's still here." Ethan stopped the car, took a picture, and smiled. Some kid must be naughty. Little did he know that a few days later, he would be terrified by that same sentence. 4. As soon as he entered the town, he felt strange about the people's behavior. Everyone was quiet. No one talked much. People were looking at him as if he had made a mistake. He stopped at a small motel. The motel owner was an old woman named Margaret. While checking in, she asked, "What are you doing here?" Ethan replied with a laugh, "I'm investigating missing persons." The woman's face turned pale upon hearing this. She was silent for a few seconds. Then she spoke slowly. "If you're sensible, go back tomorrow morning." At 10 o'clock at night, Ethan was sitting in his room writing a note. Suddenly, the network on his phone disappeared. Then the power went out for a few moments, and at that moment, he heard someone's footsteps outside. Thump, 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 like someone was walking down the motel corridor. He went to the door. He looked out the peephole. The corridor was empty. There was no one. But the sound of footsteps was still coming. And the sound slowly stopped right in front of his door. Silence fell. Ethan's heart started beating faster. He opened the door. There was no one outside. There was only a piece of paper lying on the floor. There was only one sentence written on the paper. "Don't go into the woods." Ethan looked around in surprise. No one was in sight. He put the paper in his pocket and returned to the room. But now he was more excited than ever. He was convinced that something really was hidden here. The next morning, he went to the local library. There he found old newspapers. One of them caught his attention. The news was from 1987. A young girl, Emily Harper, had gone into the woods. She was found 3 days later. But something was strange. Emily kept repeating the same thing. "He knows my name." A few weeks later, she committed suicide. Several people disappeared after that. And almost every case had one thing in common. Before disappearing, the victim had claimed that someone had called her name from the woods. In the evening, Ethan decided to inspect the woods. The sun was setting. The long shadows of the trees were spreading across the ground. There was a strange chill in the air. The woods were unusually quiet. No birdsong. No animals. Just silence. Deep and eerie silence. About half an hour later, Ethan found an old wooden sign. It read, "No further." But being a journalist, he wasn't going to turn back. He moved forward. A few minutes later, he felt someone following him. He immediately turned around. There were only trees behind him. Nothing. He consoled himself. It's just an illusion. But then, he saw a dark shadow between the trees to his left. Human-like, but unusually tall. At least 8 feet. The shadow stood still for a few moments. Then it disappeared behind the trees. Ethan's throat started to dry. He immediately took out his camera. But by the time he took the picture, there was nothing there. Suddenly, the wind stopped. The forest became completely silent. And then, Someone whispered right behind him, "Ethan." He jumped in fear. He turned around immediately, but there was no one there, only trees and darkness. A thrill ran through his body. He hadn't told anyone his name. Not here, not in the forest. Then whose voice was that? He started to walk back quickly, but after walking a few steps, he realized that the path had changed. The same tree, the same stone, but the path was going somewhere else, as if the forest itself was changing its shape. Just then, the light of his flashlight fell on a tree. There was something written in fresh blood on the bark of the tree. Ethan moved closer. His hands began to tremble. It was written in blood, "Don't look for us." And below it, the names of 17 missing people were listed. But there was another name at the end of the list. A name that had never been in a newspaper before. A name that only one person knew. Ethan Carter. And, at that moment, behind him came the sound of something running through the trees. Ethan's heart began to beat faster. He stared at his name written in blood for a few moments. Only one question was running through his mind. How is this possible? He was still alive. He hadn't disappeared. Then why was his name written on the list of 17 missing people? And in fresh blood? Suddenly, footsteps came again behind him. This time, more distinctly than before. The sound of something heavy walking on dry leaves. C-Charar, C-Charar, C-Charar. Ethan turned the flashlight with trembling hands. The light began to dance among the trees, but there was no one there. Then, he heard the same whisper again, this time, closer than before. Ethan, the voice wasn't even a man's. It wasn't even a woman's. It sounded like several voices were speaking at once. Ethan said, backing away in fear, "Who is it?" The forest remained silent. Then suddenly a shadow appeared among the trees. The same unusually tall being, about 8 or 9 feet. His hands were unnaturally long, and it seemed as if his body was made of mist. Ethan immediately picked up the camera. Click! The flash flashed, and the next moment the shadow was gone, as if it had never been there. It was impossible for Ethan to stop there now. He started running at full speed. Branches were hitting his face. Leaves were crunching under his feet. He almost slipped and fell several times, but he didn't stop. Finally, after about 20 minutes, he saw the lights of the distant road. He had come out of the forest. He looked back. The trees stood still, as if nothing had happened. But a strange feeling had arisen in his heart. A feeling that the forest had seen him, and now he was aware of its presence. After returning to the motel, the first thing Ethan did was open his camera. He wanted to know if the shadow he had seen was in the picture or not. He transferred the picture to the computer. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Trees, darkness, bushes. But when he zoomed in on the picture, his blood froze. The shadow was in the picture, but not just a shadow. Behind it were dozens of faces. Blurred, yellow, horrible. Faces like those of a corpse. And all of them were looking straight at the camera. Ethan immediately compared these faces to the photos of missing persons. His hands began to shake, because at least 5 of them were the same faces as people who had disappeared in previous years. It was impossible. Either there was a huge hoax, or something that had no logical explanation. Early the next morning, Ethan decided to meet the oldest man in town. The man's name was Harold Walker. He was about 80 years old. He had been born in Pine Hollow and had lived there his whole life. When Ethan showed him the photo, the old man's face turned pale. He immediately closed the photo. "Don't show me that photo." Ethan was shocked. "You know them?" The old man fell silent. After a few moments, he said softly, "They don't come back." "Who don't come back?" Harold looked out the window at the forest. Then he said, "Those who hear his voice." His. The old man shook his head. "This story is very old." "How old?" "Older than the town." Harold took out an old diary. Its pages had turned yellow. The diary was from 1893. It contained the writings of a hunter. The hunter had written, "At night, the voice of my wife came from the forest. She was crying for help. I followed the voice. But my wife was not there. Only a long shadow stood. and her eyes were completely black. Ethan listened in silence. Harold turned to the next page. The hunter's last words were recorded. "He knows my name now. I think he's looking for me. If anyone reads this diary, don't go into the woods." After that, the diary ended. The hunter was never found again. "What do people call him?" Ethan asked. Harold didn't answer right away, as if he were afraid to say a name. Finally, he whispered, "The Hollow Man." People had known him by that name for generations. It was said that the Hollow Man chooses his own prey. He first looks from a distance. Then he learns the name of the victim. And once he knows your name, he finds you, no matter where you go in the world. Ethan wanted to dismiss it all as superstition. But there was a problem. His name was written in blood on a tree. And that picture, which had no explanation. That evening, Ethan was in his room composing notes when suddenly a new email arrived on his phone. The sender's name was missing. The subject line contained only one sentence. "If you want to live, come to the old ranger station tonight at 11 p.m. Ethan was stunned. He tried to reply, but the email address didn't exist. At 11 p.m., he arrived at the old ranger station. The building had been closed for almost 30 years. The windows were broken. The wood was rotting. And there was silence all around. The door creaked open slowly. It was pitch black inside. In the light of the flashlight, he saw a table. On the table was an old cassette recorder. There was also a note with it. The note read, "Leave immediately after listening." Ethan turned on the recorder. A few seconds of noise was heard. Then a panicked voice emerged. "My name is Jacob Miller. If you're hearing this, he's probably already after you. I was a journalist too. I wanted to know the truth too." Ethan's body went limp. Jacob Miller was one of the 17 missing people. The man who had been presumed dead 7 years earlier. Jacob's broken voice echoed from the recorder. "If you've heard his voice, it's too late. First he calls your name, then he sees you in his dreams, and finally, the voice suddenly stopped. Then a terrifying scream was heard. The kind of scream that comes out in a person's last moments. The next moment, the recorder automatically restarted. But now it was not Jacob's voice. There was another voice. Deep, rough, inhuman. And she was just repeating one sentence over and over. "Ethan, I can see you. I can see you. I can see you." Ethan's blood ran dry, because at that moment, he heard someone breathing behind him. And on the floor of the ranger station, there was another shadow. Ethan's body went numb. He slowly turned his head. Behind him was darkness. Deep, silent, and eerily dark. But the sound of breathing was still there, right behind him, as if someone were standing close to his ear. Hee. Ethan immediately turned the flashlight on. The light spread throughout the room, but there was no one there. Just bare walls, broken furniture, and a floor full of dust. But one thing was different. There were fresh footprints on the floor amidst the dust. And those footprints were ending right behind Ethan. His heart wanted to leave immediately. But at that moment, his eyes fell on the wall. Someone had carved a sentence into the wall with nails. "He doesn't see you from the outside. He sees you from the inside." Ethan's hair stood on end. The sentence sounded like it had been written by a madman. But the dried blood stains on the wall told a different story. He immediately left the ranger station. The night was unusually dark. The moon was hidden in clouds. The air was almost dead. But as he walked towards the car, he realized that dozens of eyes were staring at him from the forest. He couldn't see anything, but he could definitely feel it, like someone was among the trees. Lots of someones. After returning to the motel, Ethan transferred the recorder's audio to the computer. He decided to analyze the sound. The first few minutes were normal. Jacob's conversation. Noise. Background sounds. But there was something strange about the last part. Ethan zoomed in on the audio waveform, and his blood froze. There was another layer beneath that inhuman voice. Very faint, almost inaudible. When he cleared the sound, dozens of whispers could be heard. They were all calling different names. Emily, David, Mark, Sarah. These were all the same people who had disappeared. Then suddenly, a new name emerged among the voices. Ethan, Hearing the name over the computer's speaker sent a chill down his spine. The next morning, Ethan headed to the town records office. He wanted to know if there was any more information on Jacob Miller. After hours of searching, he found an old file. The file contained Jacob's last investigation. Jacob had mentioned a strange place in his diary. Black Pine Cabin. It was an old log cabin deep in the woods. And according to Jacob, all the events related to the Hollow Man were somehow connected to this place. On the last page of the file was Jacob's handwritten note. If I don't come back, find the cabin. The truth is buried there. After that, the writing would end abruptly, as if someone had stopped the writer. At noon, Ethan began searching for the Black Pine Cabin. The forest seemed more eerie than ever. The trees were shaking even though there was no wind. Sometimes there would be the sound of a branch breaking in the distance, and then there would be silence. After walking for about 2 hours, he found the place. The Black Pine Cabin was located on the edge of a slope. This house was so old that it looked like it would collapse at any moment. The windows were broken. Part of the roof was missing, and the wood was black, as if sunlight had not reached it for years. The door was not locked. Ethan pushed. CHRRR. The door slowly opened. It was pitch dark inside, and a strange smell spread. Dampness. Rotting. And the smell of something old rotting. In the light of the flashlight, he saw a table in the middle of the room. Dozens of old photos were placed on the table. Ethan moved closer. In the first photo, there was a family. Date: 1978. In the second photo, a hunter. Date: 1989. In the third photo, a young girl. Date: 2003. But there was one thing in common. In all the pictures, there was a faint black shadow in the background. The same tall figure. The same inhuman form. Ethan picked up the next picture, and his hands began to tremble, because the date of this picture was only 7 years ago today. And the person in the picture was Jacob Miller. The same shadow stood behind him, just like in Ethan's picture. Suddenly, a loud explosion sounded from the upper floor. Bang! The entire cabin shook. Ethan was startled. He immediately turned the flashlight upwards. The stairs were disappearing into the darkness. A few seconds later, the sound came again. This time, it was as if something heavy was dragging on the floor. The journalist inside him was curious despite his fear. He slowly began to climb the stairs. The wood creaked with each step. Chin, chin, chin. Upon reaching the top, he saw a closed room. There was a rusty chain on the door, but the chain was broken, as if someone had recently broken it. Ethan opened the door. The room was almost empty, except for one thing. In the middle of the room was an old wooden chair, and next to that chair was a video camera. The camera was still there, as if someone had left it on purpose. Ethan checked the battery. Surprisingly, the camera turned on. There was only one video saved inside. Date: October 17th, 2019. This was the same day that Jacob Miller had disappeared. Ethan played the video. Jacob appeared on the screen. He looked extremely scared. There were dark circles under his eyes. His face had turned yellow. He was looking straight into the camera. If you're watching this video, then I might be dead, Jacob said in a trembling voice. I've learned the truth. Halloween is not a creature. It's a door. Ethan was taken aback. A door? What did he mean? Jacob was about to say something more when suddenly a shadow appeared in the window behind him in the video. Tall. Inhuman. Black. Ethan held his breath. The shadow was slowly approaching the window. But Jacob didn't know it. In the video, Jacob suddenly stopped. His eyes widened in fear. He was staring at something behind the camera. Then he whispered, "Oh God." He found you too. The next moment, there was a loud noise in the video. The screen began to shake, and for a second, a face appeared. It wasn't a human face, but the scariest thing was, the face had no eyes. It was completely dark, and its lips were moving slowly, as if it were calling out a name. Ethan paused the video. There was complete silence in the room. But then, someone whispered right behind him, "You saw. It's too late now." Ethan's entire body froze. He forgot to breathe for a few moments. The sound came right next to his ear, so close that he could feel someone's cold breath on his cheek. The room was completely silent, but he knew he wasn't alone. Slowly, he turned his head. The flashlight's light shone back, but there was no one there. Just a blank wall, old wood,
and a dusty floor.
But one thing was different. Something had just been written on the wall behind the chair. It looked as if someone had made words with a bloody finger. "You open the door." Ethan immediately backed away. His heart was beating so fast that he could hear its own beating in his ears. He had seen this wall a few moments ago. It was empty, completely empty. Then how did these words suddenly appear? At that moment, a loud sound came from below.
Bang!
As if someone had slammed the main door shut with all their might. The entire cabin shook. Ethan ran toward the stairs. But when he reached the bottom, his steps stopped. The door was indeed closed, and above it were fresh scratches in the wood, as if a huge claw had scratched it. Then, a sound began to slowly come from one corner of the room.
Screaming,
Screaming, as if something was crawling on the wood. Ethan turned the flashlight. The light fell on a dark corner. At first, nothing was visible. Then, two black eyes flashed in the darkness. Ethan's heart sank into his throat. But the next moment, those eyes disappeared, as if she was never there. At that moment, her phone rang. Traer. She immediately took out the phone. There was no number on the screen. Only one word was written. Unknown. With trembling hands, she received the call. There was silence for a few seconds. Then a girl's voice was heard. "Ethan, listen to me." He was shocked. "Who?" The answer came from the other end. "I don't have time. If you want to live, don't go to the old mine tonight." "Who are you?" Ethan asked quickly. There was silence for a few moments. Then the girl spoke. "My name is Emily." A cold wave ran through Ethan's body. Emily Harper, the same girl who had died in 1987. "It's impossible," Ethan whispered. But the voice on the phone cried, "He won't let us go. We're still here. He uses us. He steals our voices." Then the call suddenly ended. Ethan stared at the phone for several seconds. His mind was caught between logic and fear. Either he was going crazy, or something was really happening that human reason couldn't understand. That night, back at the motel, Ethan watched Jacob's video again. This time, he was watching each frame carefully. And then he noticed something. In the background of the video, there was a map on the wall. A red circle was drawn on the map, at a specific location in the forest. He immediately paused the image and zoomed in. A name was written on the map. Devil's Mine. Devil's Mine. This was the place Emily had mentioned on the phone. The next morning, Ethan went to the town library. He wanted to find information about Devil's Mine. After hours of searching, he found an old newspaper. The newspaper was from 1911. According to it, a terrible accident had occurred in a mine near Pine Hollow. 30 miners were trapped inside, and none of them came back alive. But the real horror was something else. According to the official report, when the rescue team arrived inside, all the bodies were gathered in one place. And on the wall of the mine was written in blood a single sentence. "He called us." This was the sentence that had been coming up again and again in various incidents for the past 100 years. Every disappearance, every death, every mysterious event, somehow connected to this sentence. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He opened his eyes around 3 in the morning. The room was eerily quiet. Then he realized someone was staring at him. He slowly raised his gaze to the window, and his blood froze. A shadow stood outside the window.
Tall.
Unusually tall. Its head almost reached the top of the window. Ethan immediately got out of bed. But by the time he got close to the window, the shadow had disappeared. Only a few words were written on the glass between the moisture. Mine. The next afternoon, Ethan made up his mind. He would go to Devil's Mine. Maybe there he would find the answers to all his questions. Maybe there he would find out what happened to Jacob. And maybe he could learn the truth about the Hollow Man. As dusk fell, he set off for the forest. He had a flashlight, a camera, a map, and a few essentials. But somewhere in his heart, there was a strange fear. a fear he had never felt before. About 2 hours later, he saw the entrance to the mine. A rusty iron gate, a broken board, and a warning written below it. Danger, keep out. But the strangest thing was standing by the gate. It was an old police car. Rusty, dusty, as if it had been there for many years. Ethan approached. The name on the door was Sheriff Daniel Ross. Ethan immediately remembered. Daniel Ross was the former sheriff of Pine Hollow, and he had mysteriously disappeared 10 years ago. His car had never been found. At least that's what the official record said. The car door opened slowly.
Sigh.
Everything inside was dusty, but there was an old diary on the front seat, as if someone had left it there on purpose. Ethan opened the diary. The first page was almost blank, but on the last page was a hastily scribbled note. If you're reading this, don't go inside the cave. That's not a person. That's not a place. The writing had ended abruptly, as if something had happened to the writer. And at that moment, a voice echoed from the dark entrance of the cave. A voice Ethan recognized all too well. Help! It was Jacob Miller's voice. The same Jacob who had disappeared 7 years ago. The diary in Ethan's hand began to tremble, his eyes fixed on the black corner of his ear. The voice was crystal clear. Ethan, for God's sake, help me. It was Jacob Miller's voice. It had the same tone, the same fear, the same panic that Ethan had heard in the recording found at the ranger station. But there was one problem. Jacob had disappeared 7 years ago. Jacob, Ethan called out cautiously. There was silence for a few seconds. Then a voice came from inside. Hurry up. He's coming. Then a sharp cough was heard, as if someone was in great pain. Ethan's logical mind was screaming that this was a trap, but the journalist inside him was forcing him to move forward. He turned on the flashlight and entered the mine. After a few steps, the light outside disappeared. Now only the dim beam of the flashlight remained. The mine tunnel was unusually cold. Water was dripping from the walls. There was a smell of dampness and rust in the air, as if this place had been empty of living beings for years. But Ethan knew he was not alone. He constantly felt that someone was watching him. After about 15 minutes of walking, the tunnel split into 2 parts. It was dark on the left. It was also dark on the right, but there was a difference. From the right tunnel, the sound of whispers was coming. Dozens of whispers. Slowly. Together. Ethan pointed the flashlight in that direction, and his heart forgot to beat. There were names written on the walls. Hundreds of names. Some old, some new, some he had read before. Names of missing persons. Then his eyes fell on a fresh writing, written in blood. Ethan Carter. His own name. Again. He wanted to back away immediately, but then a light appeared from inside the tunnel. A dim light, like a lantern burning. And with that light, a human shadow appeared. Jacob. Ethan called out. The shadow stood still for a moment. Then it slowly began to move toward him. As he got closer, Ethan's face went pale, because it really was Jacob. Or, at least, it looked like Jacob. His clothes were torn. His body was weak and bony. His face was yellow, and there were dark circles under his eyes. But the scariest thing was his eyes. They were completely black. There was no white. Ethan could barely speak. You're alive? Jacob smiled strangely. Alive. He started to laugh, but his laugh didn't sound human. I don't know. What is all this? Ethan asked. What is the Hollow Man? Jacob's smile disappeared. He looked deeper into the ear. Then he whispered. He's listening. I want to know the truth. Ethan persisted. Jacob remained silent. Then he said, You think the Hollow Man is a creature, but the truth is much more terrifying than that. Then what is he? Jacob replied, He's a door. A door between 2 worlds. And this ear is the mouth of that door. Ethan couldn't understand anything. Jacob continued, Something wrong entered here centuries ago. Something that wasn't human, and it started stealing people's voices. Voices. Yes, because names are power. And when he knows your name, then your path to him opens. Ethan suddenly remembered Emily's words. He steals our voices. Now, for the first time, the sentence began to make sense. Suddenly, a loud rumble was heard from inside the tunnel, as if something had awakened underground. The whole ear shook. Dust began to fall from the walls. Jacob's face immediately turned white with fear. "No," he whispered. "He knows you're here." "Does he know?" Ethan asked. But Jacob couldn't answer, for at that moment, two tall, black figures appeared in the deep darkness of the tunnel. They weren't human, but they weren't completely inhuman either. Their movements were strange, as if their joints were in the wrong places. Their hands were touching the ground, and their eyes were completely black, just like Jacob. "Run!" Jacob suddenly shouted. "Run now!" The creatures started running towards them at incredible speed. Ethan turned and started running with all his might. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the tunnel. The screams of the creatures could be heard behind him. He ran as fast as he could. He slipped several times. Once he almost fell, but fear pulled him back up. Suddenly the ground gave way from under him.
Crack.
And the next moment he began to fall, screaming. He fell into a chasm about 20 feet deep. His shoulder hit a rock. Severe pain spread through his entire body. For a few moments, he couldn't even breathe. When he picked up the flashlight, he was shocked. He was in a new tunnel. But this was no ordinary tunnel. This place looked very old. Older than a mine. There were strange markings on the walls. Markings that didn't belong to any known language. And in the middle was a huge circle. Around the circle lay piles of human bones. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Some were so old that they were starting to turn into dust. Then his eyes fell on the center of the circle. There was a black crack there, suspended in the air, as if reality itself had burst. Cold air was coming out of this crack, and inside it was complete darkness. A darkness that swallowed the light. Only then did Ethan realize that he was not alone. Someone was standing behind him. Very close. Very close. He slowly turned his head, and his blood froze. Because Jacob was standing behind him. But he was no longer the Jacob he had been. His dark eyes had grown deeper. His face seemed unnaturally long, and his smile stretched from ear to ear. Jacob whispered, "Now you've seen the door. Now he won't let you in." Then he slowly raised his hand and pointed to the crack. The next moment, a giant black eye opened from within the crack. An eye that was much larger than human imagination. And it was looking straight at Ethan. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. That eye,
It wasn't an ordinary eye.
it was so large that the entire black crack seemed to be contained within his pupil. Strange shadows were moving across its surface, as if thousands of faces were trapped inside it, screaming, aching, but without a sound. Jacob's twisted smile widened. "You thought you were investigating," he whispered, "but in reality, he was bringing you here."
Who?
Ethan's voice barely came out. Jacob pointed at the crack. "He, the one who feeds on names. The one who feeds on memories. The one who has existed on the other side of this door for centuries." The eye inside the crack blinked, and at that moment, Ethan's brain felt a sharp pain. It felt like someone had stuck thousands of needles into his mind. Suddenly, strange scenes began to appear in front of him. He was looking at his childhood, his parents, his school, his friends. Every memory in his life was passing before him like a movie. Then, one by one, those memories began to disappear, as if someone was erasing them, as if someone was eating them. Ethan fell to his knees. "No," he screamed, but the pain was getting worse. Then another voice rang out. "Don't look at her." It was Emily's voice, the same voice he had heard on the phone. Ethan immediately lowered his eyes. The pain subsided a little, and for the first time, he realized that there were blurred human shadows standing around the crack. No, dozens, hundreds. They all seemed to be people from different eras. Some ancient hunters, some miners, some modern people, and among them, Jacob Miller was there too. Ethan was startled. He immediately saw Jacob standing in front of him. Then Jacob in the fog. The two were there together. Then reality hit him. The Jacob standing in front of him was not the real Jacob. It was just a copy, a shell, a made-up form of something else. The Jacob-like creature's smile disappeared. Perhaps he had realized that Ethan had understood reality. Suddenly his body began to twist. There were sounds of bones breaking. Crack, crack, crack. His arms began to lengthen. His neck stretched unnaturally. And a few seconds later, standing in front of him, was the creature that people had called the Hollow Man for centuries. An 8-foot-tall being. A black body, long arms, and complete darkness instead of a face. As if there was no face at all. The Hollow Man slowly lowered his head. Then whispers began to emerge from his dark face. Thousands of whispers. Thousands of voices. In these voices, Ethan heard the names of the missing people. Emily, Jacob, Daniel Ross, and dozens of others. All of them. Ethan said in fear. Where are they all? The dim shadows behind the Hollow Man began to move slowly. Emily's shadow came forward.
There was sadness in his eyes.
We're not alive,
He said.
but not completely dead either. He stole our memories. He stole our voices. And imprisoned us here. Why? Ethan asked. Emily looked at the crack. Because he needs us to keep the door open. The more names, the more power. That's when the ground began to shake again. The crack began to widen. First a few inches, then a few feet, then even more. Strange sounds began to come from inside the crack. Sounds that weren't human language, but you could feel the hatred in them. Emily's face turned white with fear. No, it's never been this wide before. What's going to happen? Ethan asked. Emily replied, if the door opens all the way, he'll come in on his own. The giant eye inside the crack opened wider, and behind it, something seemed to move. Something very large. Very large. Ethan only saw the outline of the thing for a few seconds, and then looked away immediately, because the human mind could not fully comprehend it. Suddenly, Emily grabbed his arm. Listen, there's still a chance. What? The door can be closed. A glimmer of hope appeared in Ethan's eyes.
How?
Emily pointed to the ancient markings on the tunnel wall. These people knew this would happen one day. They left a way to close it. Then what are we supposed to do? Emily was about to answer when the Hollow Man suddenly moved. His speed was incredible. One moment he was far away. The next he was right in front of Emily. Emily screamed, and his shadow began to dissipate in the air, like smoke. Ethan, she screamed. Don't. Before she could finish speaking, she was gone. Now the Hollow Man was looking at Ethan intently, and for the first time, 2 red lights lit up inside his dark face.
Like eyes.
Suddenly, a giant hand shot out from inside the crack. A hand that was bigger than the entire room, made of black smoke. And it was heading straight for Ethan. At that moment, the ancient markings on the tunnel wall began to illuminate, and a sentence appeared among them. The door can only be closed with the blood of the one whose name has been chosen. Ethan read the words with a shudder, because there was only one name chosen. Ethan Carter. Ethan's eyes fixed on the words written on the wall. The door can only be closed by the blood of the one whose name has been chosen. The whispers echoing in the room suddenly intensified. Thousands of voices. Thousands of screams. Thousands of names. And among them all, one name kept repeating itself. Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. His mind was thinking only one thing. Was this why his name had already been written on the tree? Was this why he had been chosen from the beginning? Was this all a coincidence but a plan? The giant hand emerging from the crack began to move further. The earth was shaking. The rocks were breaking. The ancient tunnel was shaking, as if reality itself was about to shatter. The Hollow Man stood still. His long black body loomed like a shadow in front of the crack. But now Ethan understood. The Hollow Man was not the real enemy.
He was just a guard.
A gatekeeper. The real fear lay on the other side of that door. Then a faint voice came again. Ethan. It was Emily. Her faint shadow reappeared. But now she seemed weaker than before. You have to hurry, she said. The door is about to open wide. What if I use my blood? Ethan asked. Emily fell silent. Her eyes filled with sadness. Tell the truth. Ethan insisted. If the door closes, Emily spoke softly. Then you will close with it. The room fell silent. A strange feeling arose in Ethan's heart. He knew that this would be the answer to this question. He saw the dim shadows around him. They had all once been living people. They had dreams. They had families. Their lives. And now they were just whispers. Suddenly, he remembered what his father had said. Once when he was a child, his father had said, "True courage is not the absence of fear. True courage is making the right decision despite fear." Ethan closed his eyes. He said nothing for a few moments. Then he smiled softly. "What if I don't?" Emily looked at the crack. The giant hand was now about halfway out. "Then the whole world will pay for it." At that moment, Holloman moved. He moved towards Ethan with incredible speed. But this time Ethan did not run. He picked up a rusty dagger lying nearby. Perhaps this was the ancient dagger that belonged to these marks. The same mysterious symbols were carved on its hilt. Holloman stopped a few feet away. Then, for the first time, a clear voice came out of the darkness of his face. "You don't understand." Ethan was startled. Holloman was speaking. "I am not a prisoner. I am a prisoner." Ethan's heart beat fast. "What do you mean?" Holloman pointed to the crack. "I was once human too." Suddenly, scenes began to appear before Ethan. As if a memory were entering his mind. He saw an ancient time, perhaps hundreds of years ago. Forest, native tribes, and a young man. The young man had accidentally reached this very door, and had sacrificed himself to save the world. But the door could not swallow him completely. He was neither alive, nor dead. And for centuries he had become the Hollow Man, guarding this door. "I am not your enemy," the Hollow Man said. "I am your future." Ethan's hands began to tremble. Now he was beginning to understand reality. Every few generations, the door would weaken again. And then a new guardian would be chosen. This time the chosen one was Ethan. "No," Ethan whispered. "I don't want this." The Hollow Man's voice became sad. "I didn't want it either." At that moment, the creature inside the crack let out a terrifying scream. So loud that the entire tunnel shook. Rocks began to fall. The ground began to crack. And the crack widened. Now Ethan could see part of the creature clearly. And he wished he couldn't. Its body had no fixed shape. It was constantly changing. Hundreds of arms. Thousands of eyes. Millions of teeth. And in between them, things that looked like human faces. This was a being that the human mind could not fully comprehend. Suddenly, one by one, dim shadows began to gather around Ethan. Emily, Jacob, Daniel Ross, and everyone else. They formed a circle. Emily said softly, "The time for decision has come. If you sacrifice, then we will all be free. And if you don't, then we will be imprisoned here forever." Ethan gripped the dagger tightly. There was fear in his eyes. But now that fear was also mixed with determination. He slowly moved towards the ancient circle, brightening. The giant creature inside the crack was screaming in anger. The Hollow Man stood silently, watching him. And all the lost souls gathered around him. Ethan picked up the dagger. He brought it close to his chest. And at that very moment, his phone's screen lit up automatically. A new message appeared on it. "Don't believe them. This is not the whole truth." And the name of the sender of the message was Ethan Carter. Ethan's hands stopped there. The dagger was only inches from his chest. His eyes were fixed on the phone screen. "Don't believe them. That's not the whole truth." And the scariest thing, the name of the sender was Ethan Carter. His own name. All the shadows in the room suddenly fell silent. Fear appeared on Emily's face. Jacob stepped back. And for the first time, the Hollow Man looked anxious, as if something he wanted to hide had been mentioned. The phone vibrated again. A new message came. This time, there was only one sentence on the screen. "You're still within earshot." Ethan's heart beat faster. He looked around quickly. The Hollow Man, Jacob, Emily, they were all still there. But something had changed. The ground began to shake. The walls of the tunnel seemed to breathe. The giant eye in the far crack opened once more. And this time she wasn't just seeing, she was recognizing. That's a lie. Emily screamed. It's confusing him, but her voice now sounded weak, like noise in a recording. Jacob spoke softly. He's torn you in two. Ethan looked at him in surprise. What do you mean? The words written in blood on the wall were slowly changing. The old sentence was fading, and in its place a new truth was emerging. You are not the victim. You are the door. The dagger fell from Ethan's hand. The ground began to shake violently. Rocks began to fall from the roof of the tunnel. The giant eye inside the crack had opened fully. And now she was not looking at Ethan, but at something inside him. Emily screamed. Now you should understand. This door is not outside, it's inside.
Jacob said softly.
We are all just memories trapped inside you. Ethan backed away. His mind was spinning. He began to see scenes from his life again, but this time something was different. The scenes weren't his. Pine Hollow, the forest, the missing people, the hollow man. Everything was running like a memory loop. And at the end of each loop was the same thing. Ethan himself. The hollow man slowly came forward. His voice was clear now. I didn't come to kill you. I came to wake you up. Suddenly, everything in Ethan's mind shattered. The real truth came out. He wasn't a journalist. He had never been to Pine Hollow. He was part of an experiment, a mental containment simulation, in which the human mind was being tested by using it as a gateway. Jacob, Emily, the sheriff, were all not real people. They were fractured personalities implanted in his mind. Each one was a memory key. And the hollow man? He wasn't a creature. He was a system. A self-correcting neural firewall that was blocking the dangerous entity locked in his mind. The crack was now fully open. But now he was not in the outside world, but in Ethan's consciousness. The hollow man said one last time, if I end, you will wake up. And who you are will come back. Ethan closed his eyes. He had only one choice. Either he kept this illusion alive, or accepted the truth. He nodded slowly. Shut it off. The hollow man placed his hand on the crack. The light began to burst. The screams intensified. Emily, Jacob, everyone began to scatter. At the last moment, Emily smiled. If you ever wake up, remember us. Then everything went white. Silence. A white room. Ethan was tied to a chair. There were monitors in front of him. And a voice was speaking. Subject 17 has stabilized. A scientist closes the file. Project. Hollow door. Status. Reset complete. The last thing that plays on the screen in the room is the forest of Pine Hollow and a dark shadow who looks at the camera and slowly nods his head. A final sentence appears on the screen. Not every door closes, some are closed to open again.